Well, it's kind of like official. It looks like in the not too distant future, Poland is going to get involved in this conflict going on in the Ukraine. Yeah, Poland right now, as we speak, they are assembling troops in the southeast of Poland, and they're supposed to be peacekeepers. They've been pushing the idea of putting in Polish peacekeepers, sorry for the alliteration, into Western Ukraine. Now, why would the Poles, of all people, do this? And by the way, Poland wants to do this quite apart from its partnership with NATO. They want to do it as their own independent country doing this. They want to roll into Ukraine, Western Ukraine, and establish themselves as peacekeepers, as helping their brother nation defend itself and keep the peace, at least in Western Ukraine. Why do you think this is going on, huh? Well, it's very obvious. Poland wants to take a big bite out of Ukraine. They want to take a big bite out of the territory of Ukraine. Of course, because if you look into your history and just casually look at it, I mean, just like a Wikipedia glance through it kind of thing, you realize that there's a whole chunk of Ukraine that historically has been Polish. The city of Lviv in western Ukraine, which right now is sort of like becoming the sort of like de facto Western capital of Ukraine. Well, Lviv is a historically Polish city. It's part of a region called Galicia. Galicia is a region that is historically Polish, that right now straddles part of it, straddles Poland, and the other part of it is in Ukraine, right? It includes the Oblast of Lviv, and includes Ivano-Frankivsk, and I think it includes Ternopil as well. But anyway, it's not really important. It's just this big chunk of Western Ukraine. And the Poles have their eye on it. Oh, they want it. They want it very badly. And I've been mentioning it to different analysts and different friends and people, and they're like, no, the Poles, they're past all of that. That's ancient history. Mm-mm, mm-mm. They want it. William Faulkner himself said, the past is never history. It's never even the past. Yeah, or words to the effect. Yeah, the past is never over. It's never even the past. And the Poles want Galicia. And they're going to take a chomp out of it. They've been announcing it, amassing troops. And the big question, of course, was whether the Russians were going to do anything about it. Because the Russians are very busy out in eastern Ukraine and in southern Ukraine, where they are busy wrapping up their conquest. And make no mistake, they are conquering eastern Ukraine. They are conquering southern Ukraine. It is going to be annexed to the Russian Federation. It's going to become a part of Russia, whether people like it or not, because the Russians have invested too much treasure and, frankly, too many lives of their soldiers and too much political capital. And the sanctions were the cherry on the sundae. The fact that the Europeans stole $300 billion of Russian money, of money that they had on deposit in the West. I mean, that was flat out theft. This has never happened before. It's outrageous. But now, of course, by having stolen that money, Europe, the West, no longer has any leverage over Russia. So what are they going to do now? Huh? Sanction, Putin's puppies or something? Come on, So there is nothing to stop the Russians from annexing southern Ukraine and eastern Ukraine, which they are going to be doing. I mean, come on. Like in Kherson, they are starting to issue rubles. And all the transactions are going to have to be done in rubles, not hryvnia. Hryvnia is the national currency of Ukraine. It's going to be all rubles, and what do you think? Okay, the Russians are going to annex it, and the question became: are the Russians going to do anything about the Poles invading Ukraine? Because that's what this is. They're going to call it like a peacekeeping mission and helping a brother nation and all this nonsense. But ultimately, they're invading. The Poles are going to invade Ukraine. And so the question is, will the Russians react negatively to this or positively to this? Because, of course, negative means that they fire a whole bunch of missiles at the Polish peacekeepers, i.e. Polish troops, fire a whole bunch of Caliber missiles and all the rest of it, maybe throw in a few hypersonic missiles to boot, just to underscore the point, right? Could be that option. Or it could be that the Russians let the Poles invade Western Ukraine. Because remember, see, the Russians, they only care about eastern and southern Ukraine. Because number one, that's where all the ethnic Russians are and the Russian speakers are. And number two, the Russians have put all of their effort, militarily speaking, on the south and the east. They haven't spent much money or time or effort or even thought on Western Ukraine. Yeah, they've sent a few missiles here and there to blow up train stations and whatever, but they haven't really gone out of their way. I mean, they haven't put troops in Western Ukraine. I mean, there's nothing really between the western border of Ukraine all the way to the Donbass insofar as Russian troops, because the Russians are just not interested in that, because historically it's never belonged to Russia. It's never been a part of Russia. At different times, the Russian Empire held it, and then the Soviet Union held it. But as a practical matter, as a sentimental value kind of thing, the Russians don't care about it, because they recognize that that area, that's ethnic Ukraine and ethnic Polish. And so they're going to let, I think, they're going to let the Poles invade Ukraine. And the reason I think this is because of something that Medvedev, the erstwhile president of Russia, who is, of course, a very big deal in the Kremlin, he put out a telegram statement. Telegram is proving to be incredibly useful. But anyway, he put out a telegram statement where he said that, the Poles are going to do this. And he sort of like tut-tutted it and, didn't really think it. All right, hang on, let me just find the quote real quick, because it's actually a pretty funny line that he said. He said, oops, where did this bad boy go? Oh, here it is. And let me just translate it real quick. Oh, I'm sorry about this. I'm sorry for taking my sweet time. Okay, it doesn't matter. I fucked it up. I should have had this prepared when I did this video, but I'm not going to do this video again, so you're just going to have to take my word for it. On Telegram, basically, Medvedev said, that he's not going to bother, that Russia is not going to bother. They basically gave the green light to Poland to invade, and they're going to invade. They're going to invade, and what will happen, of course, is inevitable. What's going to happen is that there is going to be a segment of the Ukrainian nationalists who will view this for what it is, a Polish invasion of Ukraine, and they're not going to like it. They're not going to like it, and they're going to gravitate to Lviv, and they're going to start to cause all kinds of trouble for the Poles. And the fact is, see, as they lose, as the Ukrainian nationalists and the neo-Nazis and the Azovites and all these crazies, as they lose the war with Russia, they're going to need an outlet for their rage and anger. And so they're going to focus it on the Poles. They're going to gravitate to Lviv, move all the way to the west to Lviv, focus there, and they are going to start terrorizing their Polish conquerors. When I say terrorizing, I mean carrying out acts of terrorism with all those weapons that are lying around, man. I mean, the Americans, the Europeans have stuffed Ukraine with weapons, unregistered weapons. Nobody knows how many or where they are or who has them. A lot of them have been sold in the black market for, arms dealers who've made a ton of money, but a lot more are just floating around out there. And so what's going to happen? You're going to have the eastern and southern Ukraine being annexed by Russia. You're going to have a rump Ukrainian state with the capital in Kiev that's going to be, half the size of what it used to be. And in the far west of Ukraine, you're going to have the Poles occupying Galicia and slowly trying to take it. They want it, and they want to annex it, just like the Russians are going to annex eastern and southern Ukraine. And so the Poles are going to start fighting these extremists. And it's going to be a whole shit show in western Ukraine. But the Poles, there's no stopping them. And the Russians, they're so clever. I mean, you got to admire somebody. You can hate somebody and think that they're just the worst people imaginable, but that should never prevent you from looking at their actions and realizing how fundamentally clever they are. And the Russians are, I mean, you can call them a lot of things, but you can't call them stupid. And many times they are exceptionally clever. They have created, by allowing the Poles to take over Western Ukraine, they have created a focus for the rage of all the neo-Nazi nationalists in Ukraine. And they're going to gravitate to Lviv and attack the Poles, not the Russians. Because ultimately, they view these neo-Nazi nationalists, they view southern Ukraine and eastern Ukraine as populated by foreign nationals, the Russians. The ethnic Russians, the Russian speakers, they view them as foreigners. But the Poles taking over Lviv, which is a stronghold of the neo-Nazi fascists, which is chock full of Ukrainian nationals, ethnic Ukrainians, well, they're going to view those Poles as invaders and they're going to attack. They're going to go whole hog on it. And it's going to become Poland's Vietnam. Mark my words, I'm telling you right now, this is the future for Poland, for Galicia, for that whole region. I'm kind of like smiling. I find it horrifying. Okay, I mean, I just want to make it clear. The death of anybody over politics, I think, is a tragedy. But I find it funny that the hubris, arrogance, and naked greed of the Poles is going to pull them down like nothing has ever before. It's going to be quite the spectacle, and you just watch. Remember, I said it here first. Galicia is going to be Poland's Vietnam.